Good afternoon. On behalf of the German Society at the London School of Economics, I wish you all a very warm welcome here to the 20th LSE German Symposium. We are delighted to be joined by such distinguished speakers today at this very critical time for the economy as well as the EU-UK relationship. 2 weeks ago, we left off the discussion between Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey and ECB Vice President de Guindos with a promise to turn to the fiscal side. We are glad to finally honor that promise with today's event, Done Deal, New Perspectives for Economy and Trade. Our first speaker today will be the German Minister for Economic Affairs and Energy, Peter Altmaier, who will join us for the third time at the German Symposium, and the newly appointed British Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Kwasi Kwarteng. The event today will be chaired by Professor Nawa Ashraf, Professor of Economics here at the LSE and Research Director of the LSE's Marshall Institute. So I think we're in good hands today for the discussion. And now to you, Professor.
Thank you, Maurice. Thank you, LSE German Society. And thank you, Minister Altmaier and Secretary Kwarteng. What an honor it is to have the two of you here and to be able to chair this session, which I believe is the first time there are two ministers from our countries joining together publicly after the post-Brexit trade deal. So it's quite exciting to be in this moment to really ask the question, how can Britain and Germany emerge stronger from this pandemic and master the economic challenges post-Brexit? And so I'm going to hand it over to the people you've come to hear. We're going to have Secretary Altmaier is going to begin with 10 minutes of comments, and then Minister Altmaier, and then Secretary Kwarteng is going to have another 10 minutes of comments. We will then have a discussion between the three of us, sort of Q&A. And I'd like to ask the audience to then put your Q&A into the box, and we will have 20 minutes at the end for a broad question and answer with everyone. So without further ado, Minister Altmaier, please start us off.
Thank you so much, Professor Ashraf. Thank you, Maurice Hirt, and dear colleague, Kwasi Kwarteng. First of all, congratulations and jubilation, Kwasi, to your recent appointment. I still remember my cooperation with, it's more than a year ago, with Craig Clark, one of your predecessors. He was a firm Remainer, you were a firm Leaver. This is a good indication that a open and free debate and different standpoints can be accepted and will be accepted, of course, by all of us. I still believe, and this is also my message to the students taking part and assisting in this German symposium of the LSE. I believe that the economic success and the welfare of the UK is still in the firm interest of Europe and will benefit Germany and the EU as well. And it's just the other way around, that the economic success and a powerful, successful European Union will benefit the UK in the coming months and years on its way back to a nation that is not bound by a multilateral supranational integration scheme. When I was fooling in my papers over Christmas, I discovered a written report from a round table in London where I was invited to discuss as a backbencher in 1996 with Bill Cash and John Redwood. They were accusing the EU of plotting a European federal superstate that would deprive the member states from their national sovereignty. And I, at that moment, made a point and said, well, I wholeheartedly recommend to enshrine in the EU treaties an article that will stipulate the right of every member state to leave the European Union at any time it might consider appropriate. In the convention, in the constitutional convention years later, we have drafted Article 51. And the fact that the United Kingdom has decided on the basis of this article to take back control, to leave the European Union, is a final proof that this is a union, a European Union of sovereign nation states. Such a decision is possible. Such a decision has to be taken by the people of the country concerned, by its parliament and its government. And therefore, we wish you all luck in the upcoming months and years. And we know from previous experiences how difficult it is to deal with all the technical and all the formal and the bureaucratic requirements of such a decision. And of course, we want you to participate actively and successfully in a cooperation between EU and the United Kingdom. But I say at the first place, we strongly respect your decision. And I, as somebody who enjoyed so many times the hospitality of my British friends over the last 30 years, in London, in Cambridge, in Oxford, elsewhere, I fully understand that after some painful and difficult years of domestic debate in the European, in the United Kingdom, you want to take a rest, and you are hesitant before you enter new obligations and new ties. Germany is ready to respect your decisions, and we are ready to support the transformations that lie ahead of you. In 2019, that was before the pandemic, Germany was the UK's most important trading partner in terms of imports, followed by China and the US. In terms of export, Germany was the UK's second most import trading partner. Politically, the UK has been an important like-minded partner for Germany, but not just for Germany, for the Netherlands, for Sweden, for Denmark, for many others within the EU, including on issues such as better regulation, single market, budget, and trade. And now we are entering a new phase. I believe that the treaty or the agreement that was reached between the EU and the UK is unprecedented in history. It's perhaps not that close as some of you would have wanted, but never before in the history of the EU has a free trade agreement been concluded which places no tariffs or quotas on any industrial and agricultural products. That's a good signal. That's implemented as soon and as quickly as possible. It is important that both sides have committed to maintaining a level playing field. This is the basis for trusting relations. It is also good that the UK still has the opportunity to take part in EU programs as a third country. Horizon Europe, Euratom Research, ITER, Copernicus. Yes, and unfortunately, it's certainly the German students will feel it like this. Unfortunately, the UK will no longer be part of Erasmus+. But dear friends, let's be patient. Let's leave this choice to the UK. This is what it means taking back control. And I believe the UK, after a more than 1,000 years long history of basically good decisions, whether we liked it or not over the centuries, will make the best of this decision as well. We have the dynamic elements in our cooperation, and these elements are not inventions of the UK or the EU. These elements are coming from an unprecedented technological, political, and demographic change on global scale. And this is what I mean when you look at digitization, when you look at the new prospering economies in China, Southern Korea, and the older economies in Japan, new economies in India, in Bangladesh, in so many other countries, then you perhaps have an idea of what it means defending our values, defending our concept of market economy, our concept of social market economy. And this will be possible only if we will be the front runners in the process of technological innovation. We have to engage in the G7 format under UK presidency, and we will be as instrumental as we can. And we will have to have many occasions working together in the G20 format as well. Digital transformation and the Green Deal. The Green Deal where the UK and Germany and all of EU have parallel interests of transforming our economy into a green economy without, however, losing our competitivity. That is important. And therefore, I think there is a lot we can discuss bilaterally, and I'm looking forward discussing these issues, taking them up in my cooperation and partnership with Kwasi Kwarteng, whom I wish once again all the best for his time in office. We have, as far as renewable energies are concerned, as far as green hydrogen is concerned, and many, many others, lots of opportunities to demonstrate on a global scale that Europe is and remains, whether inside or outside the EU, a competitive partner, and that our companies can compete successfully with companies in other regions of the world. That is what we can leave as a promise for the younger generation of students in both countries, that we will pay attention. We will pay sufficient attention now. The Brexit decision is over and has been implemented to the economic issues that are so important for all of us. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Minister Altmaier. Secretary Kwarteng, if I could ask for your comments.
Thank you very much, Nava. That was, and also thank Peter as well. I thought that was a really good summary, very clear of all the mutually beneficial things that Britain and Germany together can achieve. And I'm also particularly grateful at the always extremely pragmatic and friendly discourse, Peter, that you've introduced. I've heard you a number of times, certainly in Germany. It's very, very good to see you here, at least virtually. And I hope that we can meet again personally in the not too distant future. I think that your extremely positive remarks, Peter, really can be sort of matched in a way by some of the things that I think have happened in the last 6 months, certainly here in the UK, that give us cause for optimism. And that we feel that at the beginning of 2021 here in February 2021, there are a number of reasons why we are more optimistic than may have been the case just 6 months ago. The first big fact that is confronting us, and it's a good fact, is the vaccine rollout, which is working well here in the UK, and of course means that we actually have some ammunition against the COVID-19 pandemic, which has struck everybody around the world with such force. And my best wishes go out to you and Germany and our friends around the world, and also in the EU. But I think there is a sense in which we've turned the corner on that with the vaccine rollout. The second issue, which you directly mentioned, is of course the Brexit deal. Now, 6 months ago, people were unsure whether we were going to get a deal or not. And really, it was quite late in the day that we managed to secure the deal. And the way in which you described it, I think, is absolutely right. And I just wish that we looked at the positive side. I just wanted to quote your words. You said it was an unprecedented free trade agreement. And it was the first time that the EU had ever reached such a comprehensive agreement with any third country. And I'd like to add as well that this was done in a very short time period. So it was really an extraordinary achievement, not only obviously on the part of the British government, but also particularly on the part of the EU. And I think we were both, on both sides, we were very gratified to see that we could make so much progress. And I'm delighted that you're very positive about this development. And then the third cause, I think, for some degree of hope and optimism about 2021 relates very much to a number of things you said relating to net zero. I mean, I was lucky enough to be the energy minister for 18 months before I was appointed Secretary of State. And I can tell you, Peter, that the net zero legislation had just been passed when I was appointed in July 2019. And we all worked within this department and across government extremely hard to try and flesh out what we meant by net zero. I mean, we all knew what it meant, but what it meant in terms of policy, in terms of the power mix, in terms of electricity generation, the impact of net zero on things like the electric vehicles, the possibilities of net zero in terms of developing, driving new technologies such as hydrogen. We'd already achieved a number of impressive milestones in offshore wind. But of course, we've increased our target for offshore wind capacity. And those are things which we've worked very closely, not only with our businesses here based in the UK, but also in terms of global partners. And many, as you know, of the people who are driving, the companies that are driving offshore wind capacity here in the UK are companies, you know, from Europe and beyond. So I think if we look at the North Sea in particular, the possibilities of North Sea Energy Cooperation, if we look at things relating, for example, to research and innovation, you mentioned Horizon, there's a huge possibility and great prospects for mutual support between the UK and other countries in the EU, most notably, I think, Germany. And lastly, what you mentioned at the beginning of your remarks should never be forgotten. Germany is a great trading partner as a country of the United Kingdom. It was certainly, before the pandemic, our strongest partner in terms of trade in the EU. And also, it was a strong partner in terms of science, collaboration of science. And we look forward really to deepening that connection over the next few months. So there's clearly a long way to go. I mean, in terms of developing our relationship, it's a strong one, but I think there are limitless possibilities in the future relating to trade more generally, but also in particular to net zero and how together we can combat climate change and actually provide leadership. You mentioned G7, you've also mentioned G20, and we are president, as you know, of G7 now, and we've got the COP26 presidency later in the year. So these are two great forums for international collaboration, multilateral cooperation, and I'm sure in both of these forums, our countries will be able to deepen the existing friendship and long-standing friendly relations that we've had over many decades now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Kwarteng. I'm sure the audience can also feel this palpable excitement about the future and this affection of the two of you for each other, despite all that's happened and looking forward. Let me, I'm going to start with a couple of questions to each of you. And, you know, I'm going to tell the audience, actually, I see the questions and answers that are coming in, and to some degree, I'm only as half full, but 3/4 full, right? Yeah. And I'm just wondering, you know, now when you look back, and particularly as you look at the challenges and the issues around worker labor standards, worker safety, worker productivity, what are the biggest challenges you see there, and how do you see this sort of post-Brexit trade deal allowing a kind of alignment that would facilitate worker productivity and safety?
So you've combined a couple of things there. I mean, with respect to workers' rights, I always thought that Brexit would lead to an enhancement of workers' rights, because one of the big drivers of the vote was the perception. I mean, some people would argue that it wasn't real, but I suggest it probably was on the part of many people, that they had seen a stagnation of their wages as a consequence of EU membership and the free movement of people. So that was a perception. It was certainly the perception of many people in my constituency. And of course, one of the things that one is mindful of as an MP is the sentiment in one's own constituency. And Spelthorne, the seat I've represented since 2010, voted 60% in favour of Brexit. And I could speak to people, and I heard people give reasons as to why they voted for Brexit. So I never saw Brexit as an opportunity to reduce standards. On the contrary, I thought it was a way in which we could focus minds on not only on the levelling up agenda, but also trying to get a high growth, high productivity economy in the UK. And I think there's ample opportunity for us really to build on that and build towards it.
Let me bring in a related question from the Q&A from Alex Morales from Bloomberg News for you specifically. So Minister Peter Altmaier in his opening remarks mentioned the importance for mutual trust of the level playing field. But since Brexit was completed, there's been a lot of talk within the UK government about the opportunities to cut rules and red tape. How will you reassure your European counterparts that you're not trying to steal a competitive advantage by undercutting them on regulation, whether it's about workers or about other types of
well, I made the point, Nava, that we want to enhance standards. I think there'll be a degree of evolution. I mean, if we wanted exactly the same thing as the EU forever and a day, we would have stayed in the EU. I think there'll be room for us to develop slightly differently. But in terms of the social compact, in terms of workers' rights, in terms of the fight against climate change, the bid for net zero, the desire to have an open, innovative economy, I don't think we're changing from that. I think we're trying to drive that. And as Peter said, when we were in the EU, we were big advocates of open, dynamic economies. And we will seek to build those bridges with the EU as well.
Yeah. So Minister Altmaier, wonderful. Minister Altmaier, when you were mentioning about the level playing field, what are you most concerned about? And what do you think is the sort of best positive path ahead that you could imagine?
Well, I believe that the existing agreement that was concluded really quite late, as Kwasi has said, is already a guarantee that a certain level playing field will be guaranteed. We will see in some of the areas different approaches, however, and with regard to red tape, I must say we have perhaps in London and in Berlin something in common that we do not share with all other countries in the rest of the world. But to make it clear, Germany is still a member of the club of the EU 27. Germany has proven that the solidarity of the EU was maintained and guaranteed at any time of the negotiations on Brexit. This is something that goes without saying. But of course, we are arguing within the club, how much of this red tape do we need? How much can we abolish? What can we do to respect standards? And I think there are not so many countries where standards are higher than in Germany, developed over the last decades. But I'm also quite sure that you can implement higher standards without always increasing bureaucracy. And that is one of the challenges ahead of us. I'm fighting like hell with my coalition partner in Germany, the Social Democrats, because they believe, many of them believe red tape is something positive, genuinely positive, because it protects you. I believe this is not always the case, and in some cases it's an obstacle for growth and competitivity and more welfare and higher benefits for the people concerned. So the question is, how can we organize? How can we organize a dialogue between the partners in the UK and the rest of Europe. I remember when I was a backbencher, when I used to be a backbencher at the beginning of the 90s, in 94, there was the very mighty, powerful Königswinter Conference. We had meetings in Cambridge and in Oxford, and there have been hundreds of people from politics, from business, journalists, university professors, MPs, politicians, many, many others. And we were debating and discussing all interesting aspects of politics, not about agreements to be concluded, not about binding decisions, but it was just interesting listening to the viewpoints of the friends and of the colleagues. And I think that that is something we can organize again in the future. And it does not have to be limited to the UK and Germany. There are so many other interesting people around in Europe. So let's try to organize such an exchange. And when it comes to the academic world, I read a book recently published by a German research fellow in Cambridge about Otto von Bismarck and the German constitution at the end of the 19th century. And I realized once again how many famous British historians are specialized in continental European and German history over the last 200 years, and how many German students have been assistants and fellows in universities across the country. So this is a basis that will help us to develop our cooperation, and therefore I can only encourage the German Student Association to continue and even to intensify and to expand the activities.
Well, indeed, Minister Altmaier, this is on the best-selling list in the UK right now.
Well, but not always. But always.
But better. And so,
I don't believe it.
And written by a British person from a perspective of the British. And so, actually, this is a lighthearted note. But let me ask each of you. Secretary Kwarteng, what does Germany do well, do you think, that you wish you could implement in the UK? And what does Germany maybe not do as well that you don't want to repeat the mistake?
Well, I mean, this is very controversial. I mean, I don't know where to start. Look, I mean, I think. Let me answer that in the spirit of cooperation. I was very struck immediately after the Brexit vote in 2016. I went, I think it was to Berlin, and I think Peter might have been there, but it was certainly one of these conferences like Königswinter that Peter mentioned. And I was very struck by the fact that the Germans, even more than perhaps other countries in Europe, were already looking forward. They were already saying, well, the Brexit vote has happened. What we want to do now is to make sure that we have strong bilateral relations with the UK and really develop that conversation, develop those relationships in the way that Peter described in the 90s, when he talked about various forums that he'd attended. And I thought that that was a really good sign in terms of the pragmatism and the can-do approach. And I think that's something that we share as well here in the UK. And I'm very pleased to see Peter reflect that spirit of pragmatism. And I think that, instead of looking at things that where we differ, I think it's good to look at things which we share in common. And a spirit of pragmatism, a can-do spirit, a problem-solving attitude to a lot of difficult questions, I think is something that we share and we look to build on.
Yes, and if I can add a few ideas. First of all, there's no doubt there are some areas and matters where Germany does better, but there are at least as many areas where the UK does better and has done better in the past. We have similar viewpoints, that is true, but we have two different political systems And the main divergence between us is the fact that we have, for more than 70 years, coalition governments, where you have to build compromises already between several coalition partners. You don't have a tradition of coalition governments. You had it once with the Lib Dems. I still remember this. This had different consequences for both of the partners, more happy and less happy ones. But it was never a British tradition, and that means the way we are shaping and taking decisions is not always the same in the two countries. And this means that regardless of the fact that we have similar viewpoints, we come to different conclusions in some areas. And I do not see this as a disadvantage, because it is like a laboratory. We can learn from each other, and we can watch what has been decided in the UK or in Germany and how it works out in practice. There is an advantage of compromise and having a cross-party consensus in some areas, but there is also an advantage of taking disruptive decisions from time to time. And I remember, because I'm quite an old chap already, I remember the era of Margaret Thatcher, when at the first stage it was very polarizing in the UK for some years, and today she has become part of the national heritage of the country, and that is a good indication that you can come to very good results, even if you have different methods and approaches.
And indeed, there's a question actually from a LSE student from Germany, Fabian Hanne, who says that the UK wants to create an infrastructure bank to promote more development in economically deprived areas in the UK. What can Germany learn from
to create an infrastructure? What infrastructure?
Bank? Infrastructure bank.
A bank, yeah.
An infrastructure bank to promote more development in economically deprived areas in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And what can Germany learn from the UK's approach to reform their economy?
Well, first of all, we have learned quite a lot from the UK's experience in the 80s and early 90s. That was seen as the Thatcherite period in the beginning. But many of these ideas have been adopted even by our social democrats, by Chancellor Schröder in the Red-Green coalition government. And we have undertaken enormous reforms of our social security legislation to make it affordable, but still functioning. This is something that we have learned. We have, I would say, perhaps not as many deprivileged areas as you can see elsewhere in the world. Why not? Because Germany has always been a federal state with a strong role of the regions, and the regions have always insisted on equal chances and rights for the citizens. So we have spent a lot of money for the rural areas. We have spent a lot of money for areas where industrial transformation was under the way already in the 80s and 90s. I think this is something where we have a good experience. We have decided now to phase out from electricity production on the basis of coal power plants, and we again will accompany it with a far-going restructuring program for the areas and the regions concerned. What we can learn from the UK is, however, that we may never stop to carefully watch what's going on in different parts of the world. I remember round tables with British colleagues in the 90s already. We had a Tory CDU round table in Cadenabbia, Lago di Como in Italy for many, many years until the Tories left the European People's Party. But I regret it extremely because the round table disappeared. And I remember my British friends talking about investment chances in Vietnam and in India and in China and elsewhere. Over the years, Germany has learned from that attitude, and today we are one of the leading investing countries in Asia. But I would really say this is something we owe also to the example of our British friends. There was one thing where we had slightly diverging interest. I remember a colleague, David Willits, Kwasi will perhaps know him personally, in the mid-90s, and he was always blaming us for being too late with the transition from industry towards services, especially in the financial sector. And I felt depressed when I listened to his ideas and conclusions. Then, of course, we invested more in services, but we also managed to conserve our industrial basis because it is a thing we can do best for more than 150 years. And today we have realized it is important to have both. And that is exactly the same process in the UK. And therefore I see another field of cooperation when it comes to the question, how can we defend under the angle of industrial policies in China, in Southern Korea and Japan, our position in the global economy. The European position in global economy is not just an EU position. It is a position, of course, of EU, but of all the other countries, not being part of the EU, but well being part of Europe.
Would you like to, Secretary Kwarteng, would you like to address any of that, sort of the sort of more
global? No, I think Peter made some excellent points. And it's very interesting that he referred to what my former colleague here in the House of Commons, David Willits, who of course was a minister in this department, was talking about in terms of the 90s. I think Peter made some excellent remarks in terms of the trade that Germany's pursuing, and I've seen this in Asia. We too are looking to new markets, particularly in the aftermath of Brexit. So it's a very exciting world out there. And I think both the UK and Germany share many of the same objectives and the same outlook. I was just thinking in terms of his reference to Cadenabbia and the mutual exchanges that we've had. You know, I've spent time with some of Peter's colleagues in the CDU. And I think, again, once we left the EPP, I think we managed to maintain very good relations as Conservatives with CDU members. I also feel that even after Brexit, a lot of those friendships, a lot of those conversations have still continued. And I think it's a testament to the fact that we have so much so many shared values and shared interests.
And I mean, foremost, one of the biggest that you both mentioned is on really thinking about green innovation and a green economy, the net zero. And so there's a few questions around that would be wonderful to get your thoughts on. We have from the Berlin School of Economics and an LSE alum, Nils Handler, who says, highly esteemed ministers, will the UK and Germany cooperate or compete in their ambition to increase their green competitiveness and innovation in areas such as hydrogen technology?
So on hydrogen, sorry, can I just come in on hydrogen specifically? I think hydrogen, I mean, I read the German strategy last year. I was the energy minister after all. And I was very struck by the level of ambition and also in the EU strategy. But of course, The strategy that we're developing here in the UK relies on the production of both what is called blue hydrogen, which is derived from methane reformation, and also green hydrogen, which is electrolyzer produced. And I was struck when I read them last summer that both the German and the EU strategies were very much focused on the production of green hydrogen through the use of electrolysis. And so in some ways, we're going down the same path, but of course, in other ways, there is a slight difference between the British strategy in something like hydrogen and the German and the EU strategy. So particularly, and lastly on hydrogen, I think that a lot of our industrial base from the oil and gas sector, a lot of the infrastructure that we've built in the North Sea, for example, can lend itself to carbon capture, which of course is a necessary concomitant of blue hydrogen production. So yes, we have shared interests, but I think there's a slightly different emphasis perhaps in things like hydrogen production here in the UK.
Yes, of course it is, because we have our own energy policies in both countries. Both the UK and Germany have decided phasing out of coal-based electricity power plants, but Germany has decided phasing out of nuclear power plants. We will switch, all of them will be switched off until the end of 2023, and that means we have to produce our energy from renewable sources, and of course the UK sticking to nuclear energy because it is not producing CO2 emissions, is in a situation that it has to substitute lesser capacities than we have in Germany. And net zero means we will no longer be able to produce energy in big quantities from fossil energies like gas or oil. And the missing link between renewable energy sources like wind, solar, and biogas is green hydrogen produced from renewable energies. This can be done elsewhere in the world, in Saudi Arabia, in Chile, everywhere, because Germany is importing 80% of its primary energy demand from third countries. And Germany would never be able, being a relatively small country, with a relatively small share of the North Sea, we would never be able, producing all our primary energy demand from renewable sources inside Germany. That's simply not possible. We would have to substitute all the oil, all the gas, all the nuclear material we are consuming today. And therefore, we believe that we will need and we will see a global green hydrogen infrastructure emerging, where oil producing or gas producing countries can find a new business model by rolling out hundreds of kilometers of electrolyzers in the desert, where we will see transport infrastructure, distribution infrastructure, and then you can use it in the chemistry, in the steel industry. Today, our steel industry in Germany is one of the biggest producer of CO2 emissions, based on coal that is needed to produce the steel. If we want to be a net zero country and European Union, then we have to substitute it. And the best way to do is substituting it by green hydrogen and green electricity. And this is why we have decided to do it this way. I know that in the UK, green hydrogen is always also an option, and but it is considered under a different angle because the energy landscapes are different in the two countries.
Indeed, and also, you know, I mean, I guess each country has its own quite significant and unique challenges. So Secretary Kwarteng, there was the reopening of a coal plant in the UK
Yeah,
at
sure.
the time, right? And Minister Altmaier, Germany is ultimately a car country, right? And there's even subsidies for trips to work, and so there's a kind of subsidization.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to talk necessarily too much about coal. I mean, our phased out date for thermal coal is 2024, and speaking to German colleagues, that phase out date is 2038 because there's a different coal mix. So I know people have talked a lot about the coking coal mine, but actually we've done a very good job, I think, in phasing out coal from the electricity system here in the UK. It's only in 2012 when I was an MP, I was elected in 2010, but even as late as 2012, 40% of our electricity was produced by essentially burning coal. Today, that proportion is 2%. So the coal story, as far as the UK government is concerned, has been a real success in terms of decarbonising our energy mix. And I think different countries have different challenges, as you say. We have a slightly different approach to nuclear energy than many people in the continent, particularly Germany. But of course, if you look at France, they have a much higher dependence on nuclear power than we would ever contemplate here in the UK. So lots of different countries will have different approaches. But one thing is clear, is that there's a huge consensus now around decarbonisation. I was very struck by the fact that it was only in October last year that the Chinese committed to a net zero carbon target by 2060. And that was closely followed by the Japanese government committing itself to a net zero target by 2050, and also the South Koreans did the same. And that was all, I think, in 1 month, just last year in October. So there's a huge global consensus building actually around decarbonisation. But as you say, different countries are going to take slightly different approaches to that.
And I guess that's the question too, is where's the scope for, is there scope for cooperation? What is the type of scope, particularly for innovation in this sector? Is there scope for cooperation, or sort of is that more of the competitive edge as we move towards?
So just on that particular, let me just, dare I say, finish my remarks. I mean, clearly COP26, if you look at what's happening this year, we are hosting COP26 in Glasgow, which will be an arena of huge cooperation, vast cooperation, we hope. I think there'll be plenty of appetite for shared goals and stating higher ambitions. And also we've got G7, which will be hosted in this country as well this year. And again, that provides a forum, as Peter mentioned, and as I think mentioned earlier, provides a platform for greater cooperation. I don't think we're going to solve or get anywhere near solving decarbonisation, waging the fight against climate change on a global basis without a great deal of cooperation.
Yeah, exactly. This is the case, and I fully share your idea of achieving a climate consensus amongst the industrialized regions worldwide. You have mentioned Japan and China, South Korea, and Europe. And I really hope that the new administration in the US will not only sign the Paris Climate Agreement again, but that we can come amongst the countries you have mentioned, together with the US, to a joint approach with regard to net zero. That would make things much easier for all of us, also under an economic aspect, because it is perfectly possible to produce green steel from renewable energies and green hydrogen. It's perfectly possible to have a green chemistry, but it's much more expensive because the costs are not financed at the expense of the environment and the climate any longer, but you have to finance them within the process of fabrication of the product. As soon as we have different approaches worldwide, we have to discuss things like border adjustment mechanisms and others and carbon contracts for difference, if we would have amongst the competing regions worldwide a consensus about net zero, that would make it so much easier for all of us to have a long-term schedule for the transformation of our economies.
Right, something you can trust and invest in, that you know.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think you know, there's a actually suggestion from one of the LSE alum, Bobby Vidral, in terms of the other types of forums in which especially Germany and the UK could meet, saying, do you think a more formal forum similar to the UK-French Lancaster House Agreement would benefit the German-UK relationship now that the two countries won't meet in Brussels anymore?
Well,
they see your mutual affection and want to make sure you have more.
I don't know whether people know this, but we have plenty of forums now where we meet. I mean, I've met Peter a number of times in Germany or heard him speak, and as he suggested, he's been to Britain on numerous occasions. I mean, far too many to mention, I think. So there's a great deal of mutual respect and collaboration, and also dialogue, which is obviously the most important ingredient of that.
Yeah, maybe there's
exactly, and you know, I'm not advocating a series of new fora where you are sitting in a formalized way and reading out your speaking notes. But what I always appreciated, whether it was in Wilton Park or in Crockett Hall or in Ditchley Park, whether it was in a historic building in Germany or in France, was just a spontaneous round table where you come together to discuss a matter that is of importance for all of us. And this has to fit the interests of course, of all sides, of the two sides, the UK and Germany, if we do it bilaterally, of countries like France or Spain, when we extend it to others. And this should not be formalized in a way you have to meet every year, but it should be organized in a way that we know each other, that we can call each other to discuss things on phone or on video. I met just before we entered in the UK, the third lockdown, and the second one in Germany. I met in Berlin the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi, who was also a very impressive guest. He's not my direct counterpart. That would be the Minister of Finance in Germany. But we had excellent conversation, as I will always have with Kwasi Kwarteng, and that makes me basically optimistic that we will not fall back in a kind of dark isolation where we are no longer listening to each other, but that we can build on the fundamentals of our cooperation over the last 70 years. And it all started when the UK was not yet a member of the European Union. It lasted as long as the UK was a member of the European Union, and it will last for the next 70 years. I have no doubt about it, and therefore I can only encourage German students, as long as they get a residence or a stay permit, to spend a couple of months or years in the UK. And I would also invite British students coming to Germany. I know many of them are so much fascinated by Asia and also by the US. That is something I fully understand, but I can tell you, you have friends in Germany too. Come and see them and meet them.
Very good. No, I couldn't agree more with Peter. I think there's a really good basis, and people forget this. I mean, if you look at the Anglo-German, the British-German relationship, the UK-German relationship, it antedated, the things like Königswinter started in the 50s, dialogues were happening, and that was We only joined the EU in 1973, okay? So there was plenty of dialogue, plenty of conversation, you know, in the last 70 years before we joined the EU. And as Peter says, I think those conversations are going to continue and the relationship and friendship will develop for very many years to come.
I think there are several students who've actually written about Erasmus and their grief over losing Erasmus. Obviously, LSE was one of those universities, and so very much hoping for exactly the type of exchange of ideas and culture that you mentioned, both of you.
It's a real pleasure to be on this forum, but unfortunately, I've got another call.
Yeah, and we're wrapping up now, and we want to thank you very, very much for joining us. I'm particularly happy. I've just married a German citizen, and so we are actually right at the forefront of these two. And it's great to see the excitement for the future ahead. Thank you both, Minister Altmaier, Secretary Kwarteng, LSE, German Society, and all of you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us today in this very positive and constructive dialogue, and especially your encouragement for students. Next month, we will be joined by John Kampfner, the author of Why Do Germans Do It Better? So I think he will appreciate your advertisement today, Professor Ashraf. In 30 minutes, we will also continue this important discussion with a business perspective with Carsten Spohr, CEO of the world's largest airline, one of the largest airlines, Lufthansa. But for now, thank you all for joining, also our viewers, and we hope to welcome you all back soon at LSE. Thank you and goodbye.